Well, hello, this is Linda Carbonell, and welcome to the new show, A Lens into the Process of the Special Investigating Unit and Child Advocacy Center of Windsor County. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. So today I have two guests today. I have Detective Christina Adams and
Laura Warco from DCF.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what you guys do. What's your position, what you do?
So I'm a detective with the Hartford Police Department, but my position is covered with the Windsor County Special Investigation Unit. So I work for Hartford PD, but I work with sex crimes and child abuse, serious child abuse, for 5 towns, and that includes Hartford, Windsor, Norwich, Woodstock, and Wethersfield.
And I supervise the child abuse investigations and assessments out of the Springfield District Office for the Department for Children and Families.
So I think today we wanted to talk a little bit about the process of reporting, where it goes, what happens with it, and all of that. So if you guys just want to jump in and just let us, any information you can get. I didn't know if you wanted to start.
Typically, it depends on the case that I'm covering. If it's an adult victim of sexual abuse, the call would typically come from the victim or from the hospital or WISE, letting us know that there's somebody that wanted to talk to police and make a report. But whenever it involves a child with sexual abuse or child abuse, that typically I am notified by DCF. And DCF will then notify myself, the rest of the unit at the SIU, and we'll begin investigating together.
Mm-hmm. And when you say DCF, what is it that starts it a concern for you, and you know that it's time for you to call?
Yes, so we have a number. We have a 1-800 number, and we get reports from anyone. So it can be mandated reporters, police officers, school personnel, nurses, doctors, family members. And so calls come into the 800 number, and there's actually there's a 2-layered screening process. So a report will come in and it will be reviewed to see if it meets Vermont statute or Vermont law for child abuse and neglect. And then it will be screened again, so it's reviewed again at the district level. So that would be what I would do. And I would look at that and just make sure that, kind of agree with the decision, review family history occasionally, and then, make the final decision as to whether or not to accept or not accept a report.
And once you do accept it, then it goes to you next?
Right.
Yeah, so as the Family Services Division, we handle all sorts of reports that might come up for an investigation or an assessment. They're kind of different tracks.
Yeah, so if you think about that, you're talking about child abuse and sexual abuse and all of that. What is it once you hear that on the phone? What's next? Do you interview the people or?
Yeah, so the first step would be to determine whether or not that should be an investigation or if it should be an assessment based on, so I think typically for this program we're talking about adults perpetrating on children, but we also serve a number of kids who, have child-on-child sexual experimentation, that we would do an assessment and kind of just make sure, see what's going on. Those things would be an assessment. The difference really is use of law enforcement and making a decision as to whether or not to put somebody on a child abuse and neglect registry. So adults who perpetrate on children, or if that's the allegation, then we would assign that as an investigation. We would contact our Special Investigation Unit, which would be Christina for her designated towns.
And then once it gets to you, Christina, what's the next process? What do you end up doing then?
From that point, as a team, we'll kind of coordinate and schedule a forensic interview with a child. Sometimes it can be a difficult process if we have a parent in the home who's perpetrating on the child. we may have to respond immediately and for the safety of that child and go right out to the school and talk to that child to make sure that they're safe. But in other situations, when it's not somebody living inside the home perpetrating on the child, we can schedule a forensic interview, which is done right at our CAC facility here in town. It would actually be right over the border in Norwich, but we use that to sit down with the child in a very child-friendly environment. We have Play-Doh there, and a board to write on and stuff. It's a good room where it's just set up where there's one forensic interviewer in the room, can sit down and talk to the child, build rapport, and it allows DCF and myself to sit in another room and observe the interview and not have too many people interacting with the child. So from there, we'll sit down and we'll do a full forensic interview with the kid and talk about what happened and get an understanding of what's going on. And if they disclose, meaning they explain the sexual abuse or physical abuse that took place, from there we're able to team and plan our next steps.
And typically prior to us kind of meeting, we'll meet as a team when the report comes in. And DCF is typically the initial contact for the family. So so the family is usually getting a phone call from family services, social worker, and those things in that kind of beginning prep meeting with the family would be to go over explaining, what is the Child Advocacy Center? What is this going to look like? Who are you going to meet there? Mm-hmm. Explaining to children that it is a place that is audio recorded and videotaped, so when they're actually there, they're not caught off guard.
Right, they know what's going on.
That they know what's going on, and that they're informed throughout the process. And some of that work that we would do with families is to really look at, does a child have a learning disability? Do they have a speech impediment? Are there things that we would need to tailor our interview to? And depending on the ages of the children, would determine how we're asking questions.
And after you get the investigation started and you got all your information, what's the process next once you do the initial interview with the child and the family services and everything? What happens then? What happens after that?
Once the interview is complete with the victim, from there it really depends on if there's a disclosure or if there's not a disclosure. If there's no disclosure from the child, then we're going to have to look at what kind of physical evidence there may be that will allow us to move forward in the investigation. And if the child does disclose, obviously that gives us more information to work with. But typically we're going to be interviewing witnesses, other family members. We may be looking for video surveillance. These kind of investigations can result in a number of search warrants, everything from all the different social media, so like Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat, that it would begin the process of doing that to see if they discussed it with anybody else, doing a warrant on the residence itself, and then once you get in the residence, any electronics that you take from the home, you're then doing another warrant on those. So it's a long process of investigating and using every tool out there possible to try and get as much information as you can. And then from there, we would work our way up to speaking to the person that we suspect is the one who did the crime. Mm-hmm. And what that looks like is myself and the DCF investigator. It's not normally Laura because she's a supervisor of the unit. But it would be one of her other investigators that I would go and sit down with at a police department, would be preferred, video, audio recorded setup, and we would do an interview interrogation on the suspect.
And so our process is a little bit different from the interview. So this is where I think the collaboration has been really beneficial. Mm-hmm. So law enforcement's piece really is around the search warrants, and while that provides us with more information, and informs our decision, our role is a little bit different. We're not, as an agency, we're not applying for search warrants. We are doing a joint investigation which can actually result in different decisions, which we can get to. But our piece during that is, so typically after we would interview the child, we would meet with the parents. So if it was something that was, if it was an allegation or a disclosure that was outside of the immediate family, then we obviously would inform the parents of what the child had disclosed. That way they can, and how best to support that and kind of what to expect. Making therapeutic referrals, seeing if we need to have the child scheduled for a medical exam, and really how to provide support to a family who a lot of the times is just receiving this information from us. So as you can imagine, that would be a pretty difficult position. So a lot of the times our job is really supporting the family through the process. It's also, kind of the responsibility of the Child Advocacy Coordinator. And then doing things like a home visit, doing a site visit. So we might go out with police to wherever the incident was alleged to have occurred, and see if there's any evidence, and doing witness interviews. Occasionally we will split those or do those together.
Yep.
And does this often go to court? Is this what happens after all the investigation and everything?
It depends which way the investigation goes and whatnot. In some cases, it would, if we're able to find enough evidence, if we're able to get not just a disclosure, but a confession. If we don't have a confession, then, we will use what evidence we are able to come up with and provide that to the state's attorney's office. The state's attorney will sometimes just review the whole case and make their decision and notify us if they want to pursue with prosecuting it or not. But that would be typically the next step.
So when the family members actually find out if they were involved, or is there sessions for them to be able to get help for themselves? I can imagine this might mentally affect them along with the child.
Absolutely. So some of those things depends on the relationship between the family and the alleged perpetrator. So if this is a stranger or a neighbor, I think then our role is a little bit different than if it's somebody who's in the home.
Right.
It's clearly different if it's somebody who's in the home. So as part of our supports that we can provide is, making those referrals to family therapy, individual therapy for the child, connecting them to a victim's advocate, and really I think kind of walking them through what this process looks like, because as you can imagine, sometimes when you're in a state of hearing this information, sometimes you're not hearing the information. So a lot of the times it's getting off the phone with somebody and then they'll call back 15 minutes later and you say, absolutely, yes, we can go over it again. Or, calling back the next day and saying, do you have any questions now that information has kind of been able to settle in?
Yeah, until they can hear it, actually.
Yep. And through the process trying to explain, because there's a lot of different people that are involved. So the outcome where a case might not go to court, there's two different, as a department, our threshold is different than law enforcement. So we have the ability to make a decision to substantiate, so make a finding that child abuse and neglect occurred, or to unsubstantiate, in saying that there's insufficient evidence to support that. So we might have a case where the department is saying, yes, we feel that a reasonable person, our threshold is a reasonable person would conclude that this happened. So you're thinking of kind of that 51% of the entire population would also agree that this had occurred. So the decision might be to substantiate, but that same case might not go to court because their threshold is higher.
Right.
So what do you mean by threshold? What is your threshold?
So there has to be probable cause, meaning there has to be some sort of evidence or a confession or something real, facts that the court or our prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this did in fact occur. Where DCF, that may be a little bit different, where they may just need a disclosure, family history, and other different circumstances to say, this probably did happen.
Yep.
Where ours is
Beyond
a bit higher
reasonable-
because
beyond a reasonable adult,
yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
So
reasonable
some of the
doubt.
reasonable adults would be marks or, something that a doctor would find or stuff like that, right?
right.
Yeah. And for somebody that's on the outside, maybe that's aware of what's going on, obviously reporting that is necessary, but doesn't necessarily mean, from what I understand when I did the show before, was that if you're reporting something like that, you don't want to quiz the child. You want to just report it,
Right.
from what I understand, because that can be dangerous too.
Right. There's when we're talking about having a child come in for a forensic interview, that's a pretty structured process and detailed out of how to ask questions in a way that's not leading, gets you information, and so sometimes that can be difficult where we're receiving reports. So if somebody has asked, and we also want to make sure that a child is not having to give their story to multiple people, not re-traumatizing or
Right.
going through that. That's the importance of the forensic interview, the audio tape, the videotape.
So you're saying it can hurt the child more by multiple people asking, or I can imagine it'd be hard to talk about it anyway.
Yeah. And that delicate balance where if you are going to make a report, there needs to be enough information as to what happened. So kind of receiving that information, but maybe not asking, in-depth questions.
Right. Not details and
Yeah, if you're not
and
asking.
whatnot.
Right, because
It's normal for a child to talk to somebody they love and trust about something that's happening, but we want to keep the detail gathering within the forensic interview. And so our recommendation typically would be that if a child does come and open up and disclose to you, make sure that it's very open-ended and, okay, tell me more about that. Don't go digging for details. Let us do that. And it's also important to know that doing those or making those questionings and whatnot with that child prior to coming into a forensic interview, even though the child discloses, it's not something that we can use in our criminal investigation. That child has to disclose with either a DCF investigator or law enforcement for it to be used.
that's important to remember.
And we can use, so I think that's one of the differences of the agency. So if a child discloses in therapy, or continues to make disclosures in therapy, that's where, I think where sometimes we can say a reasonable person would conclude that if a kid is talking about the same incident every week in therapy, but will not tell a law enforcement officer or DCF, that we still believe that this probably has happened. So it might be a different criteria for us as an agency.
Right.
And then hopefully the process of therapy will get a child comfortable enough to be able to talk to us.
I can imagine that it must be very scary for people to maybe even talk to the police or DCF, but if there was something that you could say to them to make them more comfortable, what would that be?
To make them more comfortable?
Yeah.
Well, we just like to, that's typically why we use the CAC and try and keep all our interviews there at a very child-friendly place.
That's good.
But I mean, we're very good about letting the child know that they're not in any trouble, that they're in a safe place, and that we make sure there's supports there around them to get them through the process, whether it's wise and they're coming with a trusted family member. So, and I'm sure you'll have more conversations with that whole unit or portion with Martha Neary, our forensic interviewer.
Yes.
But that's the whole point of having it at the CAC. The days are gone where we bring children up to the PD and put them in a white room and question them about this in a uniform. We try and keep that completely separate now.
And families, and I think depending on the age of the child, so older victims and as well as families do have a lot of say throughout the process of meeting with the victim's advocate. Being able to make the decision to have an interview at the Child Advocacy Center. We have had some victims who, I think of an example as like a 17-year-old who just wants to start kind of this healing process for themselves, and not necessarily pursue a criminal case. And so, understanding that if you're close to 17, that you do have, you're empowered to kind of voice that and guide the process. And we always try to frame that as it is also our responsibility to try to protect the public. But sometimes there are people who have not wanted to move forward with doing an interview, or will want to move forward with doing a DCF interview, but not necessarily law enforcement. So I think there is some level of kind of empowerment for the families to kind of guide what happens, but balanced with we have a responsibility to the larger public as well.
Yeah. And that's another thing you want to talk about is safety. If it's, if something like that's happened, obviously you get the information about somebody that has, abused a child, and that's important to get to that fact so you can get that person off the street, or at least so people know who he is or they are or whatever. So it's an important piece.
I think one of our main priorities is whenever we receive a report that there's been physical abuse or a parent or family member within the household perpetrating on the child is responding immediately and effectively as possible. So at times we will have to respond to schools and do interviews. Excuse me. At times we will have to respond to schools and do interviews. There's other times where I'll have to respond to the hospital in the middle of the night for a baby up there who's injured. DCF also comes out with me to those reports. And there we typically will skip right to interviewing the parents at the hospital. It's immediate because making sure that child is safe is number one priority, and we can't send a kid home with a parent if we suspect that they were involved. So that can begin a completely different process where we may apply for a CHINS petition and attempt to take custody of that child to make sure they're safe.
That's important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's good that you have all of this all connected and working together. And if there's something that you want the community to know about, more about the process and maybe what they should be aware of, of what they should maybe be looking out for, or how to approach something like that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that for like community minutes that might be concerned about something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think having the conversation, I think it starts with having a conversation with your kids. There really is such a strong, kind of misnomer that around like stranger danger, and I would say that a very minimal population of our cases involve strangers. Most of our victims know their perpetrators, whether they're neighbors or somebody who's in the family or has an ongoing relationship. So I think that really does start with having a conversation at home around appropriate names for body parts. So explaining to children, in the terms that doctors would use. And that's often important for us because families can have different names for their private parts. And that can become difficult for interviews. So I think having that conversation around boundaries and touch and letting people know if you're uncomfortable with something, and kind of opening up that dialogue is really where it starts. And then reporting. So if you do have a concern that that's being reported, often sometimes families will want to address things within their own family. You know, and again, we go back to kind of there is this global responsibility to protect the public. And whether or not that might mean, you know, so for Christina, it might be around, you know, not having somebody on the street. For us, our child abuse and neglect registry, the intention for that really is to protect vulnerable people. So that you have, you kind of have a running list of people that have been found, you know, the department has said has abused or neglected a child, and schools check those, right? So if you go to apply for a job in a nursing home or in a school, that you might not be able to obtain that position, and really kind of protecting our most vulnerable populations.
And that was something that, speaking with Julie, I think she wanted to talk a little bit too about educating the public, educating the children, educating everybody.
Yeah.
So is that something that you guys are now working on, you're going to be doing more of, or?
So I think they do a lot of like the mandatory reporting training in schools, and then school does a lot of kind of the direct conversations as well. I believe around the education piece, and I think the Special Investigation Unit, kind of separate from law enforcement and DCF, does a lot of the education piece.
You do?
Right.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm really glad that we have you to come here and educate us anyway about what you do and what the process is, and it kind of like shines a light that we know that you guys are out there to help all of us and to help the children, and it just means a lot to us, and I look forward to doing more shows about your organizations and things like that. And
Yeah.
I just really appreciate you both being here, and I know you had to take time off to come, but I think the audience is really going to get a lot out of this, and hopefully you'll come back and do another show or more shows. I think
Yeah,
that would be
Absolutely.
great. And before we end, though, I'd like to know if you could maybe give the community any kind of a message that you would like directly for them to know about what you do.
You want to start?
I just looked at you first.
So might need to give us a second to think about that.
I think just knowing that you know, the message would be to know that there is a place to go, that there are people who are willing and ready to hear stories in a pretty genuine and compassionate way, you know, and that you're not alone in that. So I think that would be the message I'd like to share.
Yeah, that's important. Christine, did you have one?
I guess the message that I would have is that this whole process that we have here is created to help you guys through this whole situation, and we're here for you. We've seen it, and it is a monster to deal with, but we're prepared to be there for families with therapy and walking them through the process and connecting them with victims advocates through the criminal process. It is scary, but we're a team here to help you through that.
I appreciate you guys. I really do. And do you have you understand you have a number that people can call if they have questions or want to know more about you? What you do?
So
Is
I'm,
it Child Advocacy Center, is it?
well, we have the SIU, but I'm based at Hartford Police Department. So if you're in one of the 5 towns, it would go straight to me.
So thank
Yeah.
you guys for being here, and I look forward to doing another show.
Well,
So,
thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yes.
This is a great program. It's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to say goodbye for the lens into the process of the Special Investigating Unit and Child Advocacy Center of Windsor County. This is Linda Carbonell. See you later. Bye.